Nye.
Usually, when we talk about a zombie, we immediately picture the movies, right? Like the undead just sort of stumbling around, covered in dirt, looking completely rotten.
Right, yeah, exactly.
But, what if a zombie didn't look like a monster at all? What if it looked, what if it looked perfect?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a creepy thought.
Right. Just imagine a massive, sprawling institution with this gleaming headquarters. They have flawless press releases, a super busy schedule of events, and just an immaculate public reputation.
Sure.
But if you actually open the doors and, walk the halls, you realize there's no actual pulse. Like the lights are on, the machinery is running, but nobody is really home.
Yeah, and that is a terrifying, yet honestly incredibly common phenomenon in human organization.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we inherently assume that decay is obvious, that rot always looks like rot, But often, the most severe systemic decay is just perfectly insulated behind a highly successful facade.
Yeah.
And that psychological dynamic isn't just a modern corporate problem, it is ancient.
Which brings us right into the heart of today's deep dive. So, welcome. Today, for you listening, our mission is exploring this ancient community that looked absolutely flawless on paper, but was harboring a dark, fatal secret.
A really fatal secret.
Yeah. We're analyzing a historical and biblical text, specifically the book of Revelation, chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. This is the famously severe letter to the church in the ancient city of Sardis.
Right.
And to truly grasp the mechanics of how a community can fall into this zombie state, we really have to ground it in the dirt and the culture of the city itself.
Yeah, because the geography and, the civic psychology of Sardis, they're essentially the keys to unlocking this entire text.
Totally.
You really cannot separate the spiritual state of these people from the literal air they were breathing.
Okay, so let's build that world for a second. Sardis was located about 30 to 48 miles south of Thyatira. And it was sitting right on the major Roman postal road.
Smack in the middle of the trade routes.
Exactly. If you were a merchant walking into the lower city during the early Roman Empire, you would be just overwhelmed by the sheer wealth of the place.
Oh, yeah. It was staggering.
We are talking about a community whose fortune literally flowed out of the ground. They actually panned gold dust directly out of the nearby Pactolus River.
Which is wild to think about, just literal gold in the river.
Right. And on top of that, they built this massive, globally dominant wool and garment dyeing industry. So you'd smell the heavy dyes in the air. You'd see the endless flow of capital in the markets.
And beyond just the wealth, it was a city defined by this almost mythological resilience,
Oh, for sure.
Its history reads like this relentless list of empire-ending events that Sardis just somehow survived. In the 7th century, it was captured by the Sumerians.
Right.
Then the 6th century saw it fall to the Persians and the Athenians. Cyrus the Great famously conquered it, which actually turned Sardis into the grand western end of the Persian royal road.
Yeah, and then later, the tactician Antiochus III the Great claimed it. It's honestly a city that just refused to die.
Exactly. And it is so crucial to understand the psychology of a culture with that kind of resume.
Yeah, they must have had quite an ego.
Oh, huge. When a society survives that many catastrophic conquests, this intense local arrogance sets in. They believed they were essentially eternal.
Even when the literal earth shook.
Right. Even when a massive earthquake completely leveled Sardis in AD 17, they bounced right back. Emperor Tiberius financed a massive rebuild for them.
And the locals were so politically pragmatic about their survival, they built a temple honoring Tiberius right alongside their ancient pagan shrines, just to say thanks.
Yeah, they knew exactly how to play the geopolitical game to maintain their elite status.
But the game eventually changed. And this is really the tragedy of Sardis. Despite all that resilience, geopolitics shifted away from them.
Slowly but surely.
Rome eventually made Constantinople its eastern capital. And to support that massive shift, a brand new, highly efficient road system was built. And that new system bypassed Sardis completely.
It was basically an economic death sentence disguised as a minor inconvenience.
It totally makes me think of, like, a legacy tech company.
Yeah.
Like a massive 1990s hardware giant.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Like they still have the sprawling, beautiful campus, the billions in cash reserves, and the historical prestige of having basically invented the industry.
Yeah.
But Everyone inside the tech world knows the underlying architecture is totally obsolete. The world has moved on to cloud computing, and they are still aggressively marketing mainframes.
Right. They aren't going to go bankrupt tomorrow, but the ultimate end of the company is already mathematically certain.
Exactly.
That is a perfect parallel, because the decline of Sardis, it wasn't a sudden dramatic collapse. It was a slow, agonizing fade into irrelevance that took centuries.
Wow.
They just lived on the fumes of past glory until the Mongol warlord Tamerlane finally wiped them off the map in AD 1402. So the city was a walking ghost long before it was literally buried.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have a physical city slowly dying of irrelevance, right? Fiercely clinging to the reputation of its golden age.
Yes.
And the text reveals that the Christian church inside this city had absorbed that exact same psychological disease. The physical decay of the city perfectly mirrors the spiritual death of the church.
It really does. And the text establishes this thematic mirroring immediately, just through the specific way Christ introduces himself to them.
Right.
Because in these letters, the divine introduction is never just generic, It is always a surgical strike addressing the exact vulnerability of that specific community.
Right, because in the letter to Thyatira, which we've looked at, the introduction was terrifyingly martial. He introduces himself as a divine judge with eyes like a flame of fire.
Yeah, super intense.
But here, the title shifts to something deeply unsettling in a totally different way. The text says, "He who has the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars." Going back to our legacy tech company analogy, it's like the original founder walking into the boardroom of this failing, bloated corporation. He doesn't come in yelling or throwing chairs.
Right.
He just quietly walks in, holding the original founding charter and the exact blueprints for the technology the board abandoned a decade ago. By simply introducing what he holds, he highlights exactly what they lack.
What's fascinating here is the precise nature of that missing solution. The imagery breaks down into 2 vital components, the stars and the spirits.
Okay, break that down for us.
So the 7 stars refers to the 7 messengers or elders. These were the literal physical individuals who traveled across the Aegean to the island of Patmos.
Where John was in exile.
Exactly. They visited John, and they carried this physical book of Revelation back along the postal road. They are the human conduits of the truth.
Okay, and what about the 7 spirits of God? Because, that phrase sounds incredibly mystical if you don't understand the underlying textual mechanics.
It does. It requires looking at the prophetic tradition they would have known deeply. Specifically, Isaiah chapter 11, verse 2, and Zechariah chapter 4.
Okay, so what do those passages say?
Well, Zechariah provides the visual, a lampstand with 7 lamps, like a menorah.
Got it.
And Isaiah provides the characteristics. It defines this 7-fold spirit not as 7 different entities, but as the complete spectrum of the Spirit of God.
Which includes what, exactly?
It's wisdom, understanding, counsel, strength, knowledge, and the reverence or fear of God, plus the Spirit of the Lord itself, making 7.
And since the number 7 represents absolute completeness and wholeness in this literature, Christ is essentially presenting himself as the source of total, vibrant, dynamic life.
Yes, but think about why those specific traits are the exact antidote to a zombie state.
Oh, that's a good point.
A community that is just blindly going through the motions of religious tradition, well, they lack internal counsel and understanding.
Right, they're just running on autopilot.
Exactly. They are acting on bureaucratic muscle memory, not dynamic wisdom or strength. When Christ says he holds this complete spirit, it is a devastating exposure of their emptiness.
Wow.
He is standing before a community running on absolute zero, holding the fullness they threw away.
Which leads to a moment in the text that honestly feels like a gut punch.
It really does.
Because in almost every other letter to these ancient churches, there is a distinct pattern, right? There's a compliment followed by a critique. Like, your dedication is great, but we need to work on your quality control.
Right, exactly.
But with Sardis, the praise is entirely absent. The diagnostic is just merciless. It says, I know your deeds, that you have a name, that you are alive, but you are dead.
It is the ultimate stripping away of the facade. Just the absolute contradiction between the external brand and the internal reality.
But wait, I have to challenge the logic of the text here for a second.
Okay, go for it.
How can a community be declared entirely dead if the text explicitly acknowledges they are actively performing deeds?
That's the big question.
Right. Like if we look at the culture of early Christian communities, these deeds likely involved profound social work. Feeding the destitute, caring for widows, operating rudimentary hospitals.
Absolutely, they were doing those things.
These are objective goods. It feels highly contradictory for a divine judge to look at massive, tangible charity and essentially say, this is nothing to me just because of an internal flaw. How does a busy, outwardly charitable organization equal a corpse?
Because the text forces us to separate the action from the agent.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, in this theological framework, an action divorced from the correct internal state is meaningless. The deeds were incomplete because the people performing them were fundamentally living a lie.
Ah,
They had the branding of a vibrant faith community, but two critical internal failures negated all their external work.
so let's break those down. What were the specific failures?
First, their deviation from doctrine. They had slowly, perhaps comfortably, abandoned the core teachings they had originally received.
So they kept the social club but lost the animating truth.
Exactly. And second, which is more visually striking, the text condemns their sin-soiled garments.
Man, that is such an intense metaphor.
Yes.
Soiled garments. What is the mechanism behind that imagery?
Throughout this scriptural tradition, in passages like Isaiah 64 and the Book of Jude, garments are the universal symbol for character.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, your garment is what you present to the world. It's your nature. Their character was defiled by hidden compromises.
Probably absorbing the rampant materialism and pagan compromises of the wealthy city around them.
Almost certainly. The text defines spiritual death not as physical stillness, but as separation from the life of God, which is a concept reinforced in letters like Ephesians and Colossians.
Right.
You can have a flawlessly organized food drive, but if the people running it are governed by deep-seated malice, greed, or moral corruption, the institution is dead.
Right.
They were just mimicking the life of a true community through sheer institutional momentum.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because the text doesn't just issue a death certificate and walk away.
No, it doesn't.
There is this sudden, urgent ultimatum, a command to basically snap out of the coma.
The diagnostic is severe, but the door for intervention remains open, at least momentarily.
Yeah, the command is rapid fire. Wake up, strengthen the things that remain, which are about to die, remember the truth you received, keep it, and repent.
And the threat attached to ignoring this is terrifying.
It really is. Because if they don't wake up, Christ promises to come against them like a thief at an unknown hour. Now, the thief in the night is a common metaphor for sudden judgment.
Right, you see it a lot.
But given what we know about the city of Sardis, this had to land like a bomb.
Oh, it is a masterclass in psychological targeting. To understand how chilling this threat was, you have to look at the physical topography of Sardis.
The actual layout of the city.
Right. The original acropolis of the city was built on a sheer, towering cliff of loose, friable rock. To the citizens, it was visibly unassailable. They believed they were untouchable.
The ultimate false security.
Precisely. Yet not once, but twice in their history, they were conquered precisely because of that arrogance.
Wait, twice?
Yes.
Huh?
First by Cyrus the Great, and centuries later by Antiochus III. Both times, enemy soldiers carefully climbed the sheer rock face under the cover of darkness.
Oh, wow.
And both times, they succeeded because the Sardian guards on the wall felt so secure in their fortress that they had literally fallen asleep at their posts.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah.
So when the text says, wake up or I will come like a thief, it's not abstract poetry. It is weaponizing their own deepest civic trauma against them.
Exactly.
It's saying you are making the exact same fatal error your ancestors made. You think your reputation protects you, so you fall asleep on the spiritual wall. The enemy is already scaling the cliff.
It is a profound warning about the danger of complacency. The remnants of actual truth and vitality in their community were bleeding out, and they were just too busy admiring their reflection to notice the siege.
However, the text makes a crucial distinction here. It wasn't a universal failure.
Right, there's a bright spot.
Even in this decaying, compromised environment, there was a tiny pulse. The text notes there were a few names in Sardis who had not soiled their garments.
A faithful minority who refused to absorb the hypocrisy of the majority. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals the highly granular nature of this divine judgment.
How so?
Well, the institution as a whole is condemned. The corporate entity of the Sardis church is declared dead. The critical mass necessary to save the community's standing simply isn't there.
Right.
But the judgment doesn't steamroll the individual. The faithful remnant is seen, preserved, and offered a spectacular reward.
And that reward directly contrasts the failure of the majority.
Mm.
Because they kept their garments, their character unsoiled by the surrounding corruption, Christ promises they will walk with him in pure white garments throughout eternity.
And that white garment is heavily loaded with cultural significance.
What did it mean to them back then?
In antiquity, the color white signified absolute purity, the festivity of a triumph, and ultimate worthiness. Roman citizens wore pure white togas on days of national celebration or victory.
Okay.
So to be promised white garments is to be promised a public, eternal vindication of a quiet, private faithfulness.
Which seamlessly bridges into the final permanent promise made to these faithful overcomers.
Yeah.
The text states that Christ will not erase his name from the book of life. Now, to our modern ears, the book of life sounds like, ethereal theology.
Right, like something mystical in the clouds.
Exactly. But for a first-century citizen walking through the massive columns of Sardis, what did a phrase like that actually trigger in their mind?
It triggered a highly political, intensely practical reality. Every ancient city maintained a civic register.
Like a census.
More than that, this wasn't just a phone book. It was the bedrock of your identity. If your name was in the register, you had the right to vote, the right to own property, the right to legal protection. You were an undisputed citizen.
It was your literal proof of existence in the civic order.
Yes. And the terrifying flip side of that ledger was the power of erasure.
What do you mean by erasure?
Well, if a citizen committed a capital offense, a treasonous act, or brought severe shame upon the city, the ruling authority, the king or magistrate, would take a stylus and physically scrape their name out of the public parchment or stone.
Wow.
It was a complete obliteration of their civic identity. You basically became a non-person.
So layer that onto the reality of Sardis. You have this tiny, faithful Christian remnant trying to survive in a city that is slowly sliding into oblivion.
Right.
A city whose very own civic register will eventually be burned to ash by Tamerlane's armies.
Exact.
They are marginalized by their own compromised religious leaders and likely mocked by the wealthy pagan culture around them. And against that backdrop of total instability and decay, Christ hands them the ultimate anchor. I will never erase your name from the Lamb's Book of Life.
It is a guarantee of an eternal, indestructible citizenship that outlasts all the decaying empires around them.
That is so powerful.
But the promise goes even further. He doesn't just promise to refrain from erasing them. The text says he will actively, proudly confess their names before his Father and before the angels.
Oh, wow.
In an ancient Mediterranean culture driven entirely by honor and shame, to have your name spoken and validated in the highest possible court is the absolute pinnacle of victory.
So what does this all mean for us? When we zoom out and look at the trajectory of the text we're analyzing today, the letter to Sardis marks a deeply chilling turning point in the sequence of the 7 churches.
It really does.
The earlier churches, despite facing heavy persecution and brutal internal struggles, they largely held the line.
They were battered, but they were fundamentally alive.
Right. But from Thyatira onward, a severe internal rot sets in.
And it culminates here in Sardis, a dead church existing inside a dying city.
A community that had completely mastered the art of public relations. They generated the activity, the noise, the visibility of a thriving institution. But they had utterly lost the sevenfold Spirit of God that actually animates a faith.
They were operating on the momentum of a ghost.
Exactly.
And that brings us to the profound underlying mechanism of this entire text, which actually references a principle found in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 17. Judgment begins with the house of God. The text asserts that the divine eye does not start its severe evaluation by looking at the pagan empires, the invaders, or the obvious cultural villains. It starts by intensely scrutinizing the very people who claim to represent the divine.
It completely inverts our natural human assumption. I mean, we almost always expect the harsh critique to fall on the outside world.
We do, and this forces us to consider a much more uncomfortable reality about how decay actually operates within any human system.
Right.
Because when we look at history, we tend to believe that institutions collapse because they are overwhelmed by external forces, by shifting markets, invading armies, or cultural opposition.
Sure.
But the lesson of Sardis is that true collapse is almost always an inside job. It is the slow, quiet process of a community learning to value its reputation over its reality. So here is a thought to chew on. The most dangerous moment for any movement isn't when it faces massive resistance.
No.
No. The most dangerous moment is when everyone agrees it is successful, the machinery is running perfectly, and the people inside completely forget why the machine was built in the first place. When you look at modern institutions or communities that claim to be alive and doing good works, how often is their most severe evaluation actually coming from the inside out rather than the outside in?
You spend all your time guarding the gates, completely unaware that the foundation has already turned to dust. That is definitely something to think about.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the history, the psychology, and the hidden warnings of Sardis. Until next time, for everyone listening, keep questioning the facade and keep looking for the truth beneath the surface.
9.